Welcome to Every Trait, the Pro Biopunk Philosophy channel. You may call me ZJ, and today we're going to be doing one more rewrite because we're still in phase one. Um, I said we were done with rewrites. I lied because we never went full biopunk. We cannot end the rewrites until we go full biopunk. So we're going to be using the Splicers from Batman Beyond because they're already a biopunk gang. We're going to be doing this different than we've done it before. We're not going to be completely rewriting them. We are going to be moving the story forward with like a sequel to what happened in the cartoon. In the cartoon, there was a Splicer gang. They would modify themselves, they would make themselves into hybrids and things. It was very not real sci fi because they just would get an injection and transform, and that's not how anything works in biology. But they said it was like some sort of, I'm guessing it was some sort of extra DNA, like a chromosome that's additional to the other ones. And so Batman could just inject them with something and it would dissolve that extra chromosome and then they would just turn back. So they ended up trying to change him against his will, and he responded by changing them against their will, which is something we're going to get into a little bit later, the implications of that. Now, the old splicer system caused instability in the mind, which caused them to go crazy. So the new splicers, which form like half a decade later, they use a different system. They actually change the core DNA instead of adding an extra chromosome or an extra like DNA loop or something. This prevents the instability, but it also has the added benefit of Batman's reversal serum no longer working on them. That's a good thing. So for them, maybe not for Batman, but they actually end up spreading all over the East Coast. And Batman tries to shut them down, but has a really hard time because everyone's being tight-lipped about it. But before we can get into why people are not talking, not snitching, we need to talk about what the new Splicer Gang is. They are what I would classify as a medical gang. A medical gang is a gang that provides medical services primarily. Now, they have the advanced enough technology to splice. Surely they have the advanced enough technology to do an appendectomy or something. So that's what they are. They are a gang that provides medical services in black market mobile clinics that don't trade above board and, So why do people join the splicers? Some of them join because they believe in the clinics. Some of them modify even because they believe in the clinics. They want to be able to defend them. External security is regular people. Internal might be hybrids. Why aren't hybrids guiding the outside? Well, if there was a bunch of hybrids stood outside a building, it'd be like, gee, I wonder where the clinic is. So, of course, it's regular people outside. There are regular people who are members of the new splicers. Some people splice just to give a big FU to people in charge. They do not believe that there should be some bureaucrat who owns their marrow and the skin wrapped around their muscles and their DNA. They think they should own their own body. They believe a soul owns its body. So they will make changes just to show that they can, to show that the laws against it don't affect them. So they might just have weird eyes or like have quills or feathers or something in place of hair because they're just trying to make a statement. And some people modify because they feel uncomfortable in their own skin, and some people modify because they just don't want to feel afraid anymore. It's the DC universe we're talking about here. There's clowns go around blowing up buildings. I mean, it's crazy. So yeah, if you could get an edge where you wouldn't need to feel afraid, even just like a basic hybrid, enhanced senses, enhanced mobility, you could sense danger coming, you could get out of the way. You don't have to be a superhero or a supervillain. You could just use that to survive. So there are a lot of splicers, and they mostly just defend their clinics. They don't attack people. They don't do muggings. They don't need to. They make enough money off their medical services that that's how they operate. So that's why people aren't talking. But to really explain why people aren't talking, I need to explain the state of the world in this rewrite. So if we take things happening in the real world and we apply them to Batman Beyond, we can assume that medical costs in the future will be even more expensive than they are now. This is happening globally too, not just in the United States. There are efforts being made to deliberately sabotage the single-payer systems of other countries to cause them to collapse to become like the US system. So the people profiting off of the US system can profit off other countries as well. This is becoming a global thing. So it is entirely possible that this would be everywhere, that there would be splicer gangs, medical gangs popping up. This is something that could really happen. Maybe not splicers, but medical gangs is something that could really happen. There have been things like that in the past. We're not going to go into all that right now. It's way too political, but another thing, in addition, is the technology that they use being made illegal. It being illegal to do biorestructuring or genetics. This is already happening in many places. Laws are being written against this left and right. by the left and the right. So, yes, this is possibly a thing that would happen. So, your 7-year-old daughter is dying a degenerative condition. Sorry, you just have to watch her die. It's illegal to cure her. So, yeah, you can see why there'd be an appetite for medical clinics. Another thing that might happen in the future, at least in the US, is the reopening of debtors' prisons. If things keep going along their current lines, we could see debtors' prisons reopen, which means no more bankruptcy. You just go to prison and work unpaid labor for the rest of your life. There's a word for that. It rhymes with Avery. So you need something done, even if it's something that doesn't require the new technology. Are you, and you can't afford to pay the exorbitant fee at the hospital, are you going to become a slave, or are you going to go to the Splicer clinic, or are you going to just let the disease take you? Those are your three options. So why doesn't Terry and Bruce, okay, so the new Batman's called Terry, Bruce is too old to be Batman, even in Batman Beyond. Sometimes he shows up in his I'm a fight Superman suit, but most of the time he's not. And this is 5 years later, so now he's bedridden. It's just Terry. But why are they unaware of how valuable the Splicer clinics have become? It's because they're insulated. I mean, think about it. Bruce can afford the hospital bills, and if he needs biorestructuring technology or something to cure something, he can go to some microstate where it's legal, even if they have very difficult, like, border policies. He has the pull. He could get in, and if anything happens to Terry, Bruce covers it. So Terry's insulated too, even though he's not from nearly as rich of a background. So they don't get it. Now the splicers, they have a rule. They don't splice in superpowers because it can cause too much mental instability. Because you have to activate the superpower somehow. So that's why they don't give themselves the ability to shoot laser beams out of their nostrils or eyes or ears or elbows or whatever. They just give themselves the abilities of other natural animals. But that's enough for them to just survive on the street, and it doesn't cause them mental instability that giving themselves real superpowers would. So they can't fight Terry. Terry's nanotech supersuit is just too advanced. Terry's too good at fighting. And he's a natural teratophobe. So he, of course, is going to go full force against modified people, against people who look different. So he is they can't beat him. So they have to keep moving. They have to stay underground, etc., etc. Eventually, they realize he's going to take them down. He's getting closer and closer every day. So they break their rule. They splice in a weak superpower, very weak, low-level technopathy. This is the ability to turn a TV on or off at will or something. Okay? It's not that big a deal. This is not something you can splice in real life, but this is a comic book. And this is a power that exists in DC. So we're sticking to the setting. So one of them doesn't make it. One of them goes insane. One of them needs a keeper or a handler now, but can still be directed to use their power. The other 4 turned out okay. If they had gone with a more extreme power, it would have been much worse numbers than that. And this is why they don't do it, because they're always going to lose someone. They're always going to, in this case, they basically lost 3 people, even though one of them they can still use. They lost them. They were probably, some of them were friends with that person, So they end up essentially letting themselves being baited into the open. They let Batman bait them. The only way to trick Batman is to make him believe he tricked you. So they know he's trying to bait them into the open, so they fall for it. They all attack at once because they've seen this other suit, the one that Bruce uses. They don't know that Bruce can't get in it anymore, but they've seen it, and they're trying to bait it out into the open to get both of them at once. And the suit does show up. It's just being remote controlled by Bruce from his bed. And because Terry's being overwhelmed because there's just so many splicers attacking him, and they have different abilities, and some of them, fire quills out, and some of them have enhanced reflexes and mobility, and some of them have increased strength to weight ratio, and etc. So he's being overwhelmed. So the big suit lands, and all 5 technopaths at once combine their powers to A, determine where the suit's being controlled from, and to B, shut them down. So the suit doesn't have a person in it. They just scuttle it. And Terry, they have his suit fuse up like this, and it's nanite, so it becomes like a coffin. You can't even see his arms anymore, and then it shuts down. So nothing they can do. And what happens to them after that? Maybe the Splicers are able to convince them of how important the clinics are. Because if the clinics fall, the entire East Coast falls. I mean, people would get so desperate. Home invasions would increase tenfold. The muggings would increase tenfold. I mean, it would be a madhouse. So maybe they're able to convince them back off. Maybe not. Uh, but that would be the end of the story. I mean, there's nothing they can do in that situation. They can get to Bruce. He's bedridden. He doesn't have anyone to defend him. Terry is in a coffin now. He can only breathe if they let him. Yeah, so I mean, this is the end. But and other superheroes aren't going to show up to help them because other superheroes might not be insulated from the medical crisis, so they understand the importance of the Splicers. So in this story, the Splicers are clearly the good guys, and Batman is the antagonist. But how can the Splicers be the good guys if they're doing eugenics? Eugenics is always bad. Forced eugenics leads to extinction every time. I've talked about this before. The Splicers aren't doing that, though. The old Splicers were, but the new Splicers that I presented today are not doing that. They're giving people choice. They're not trying to control people's bodies. They're not trying to tell people what they can and cannot be. They're not forcing anything on anyone. In fact, someone who believes in eugenics would call the Splicers, what they're doing, dysgenics, as an insult. They would say the Splicers are dysgenicists. So they're obviously not doing eugenics. If eugenicists themselves would hate what they're doing, yeah, no, they're doing the opposite. They're embracing the idea that a soul owns its body. So the eugenicists in this story are the bureaucrats and Batman for trying to control other people's genetics. Is this character assassination of the Batman character? Well, no. Not only has he changed people against their will in multiple other cartoons and comics, he did so in the Batman Beyond cartoon. Like I said, they tried to change him to be like them against his will because they were the crazy Splicers, the old Splicers, and he did the same thing to them. He forced them to become like him. They were trying to enforce on him their idea of genetic purity, and he enforced on them his idea of genetic purity, which is based on nature bias. He is a default supremacist. Terry is a default supremacist. Terry believes that default people are always morally, ethically, and mentally superior to modified people. And this is how he was in the cartoon. I'm not actually changing his attitude at all. This is how he was actually presented. He invaded other people's bodies, changed them from the inside out against their will. Their spleen, their spine, their marrow, their heart, their lungs. He invaded their bodies and made changes against their will. And this was portrayed as a heroic act in a cartoon watched by children. And parents were cool with it because status quo, baby. And it fits nature bias. So this is likely to continue in cartoons and comic books and things like that. The new Spicer gang I've presented to you here today, you'll never see a gang like that presented in fiction because they are an affront to the status quo. They stand for real freedom. They are freedom fighters. So how do you tell the difference between a freedom fighter and the other thing? Well, first of all, they're not blowing up buildings. They're not harassing people. They're not doing any of that. The worst they'll do is maybe silence a snitch, which is bad. It is illegal. It is evil, but it's what they got to do because they're operating outside the law. Because the law won't let people cure their kids of a disease they're dying from. So, they are the good guys. The main way you determine if someone's a freedom fighter or the other thing is, are they fighting for freedom? Well, you got to define freedom. What is freedom? Freedom is choice. The more choices you have in life, the freer you are. That's literally what the word freedom means. And so that's why a slave is considered the opposite of free, because they don't have any choices. So are the Splicers fighting for people to have more choices or less? More. Only if your choice is to take away the choice of someone else is choice not freedom, because you are trying to be a tyrant. You are not doing something to yourself. You're doing something to someone else at that point. And that's not freedom. So, but yeah, they definitely represent freedom. But they only represent freedom, you could say, because I laid it on so thick with the debtors' prisons and everything. So let's peel that back. Let's remove the debtors' prisons. Are they still the good guys? Yes. Because they provide medical services with technologies that are not allowed otherwise. They could cure you of something you would otherwise have to die from. So yeah, they're the good guys. Okay, what if we roll that back? These technologies are allowed to be used for medical purposes now, legally, just not for modification. Are they still the good guys? Yes. because the hospitals are exploiting people and charging way too much. And also, they believe in freedom. They're fighting for your right to own your own body. So they are the good guys still. Okay, what if we make the hospitals not expensive? Are they still the good guys? Yeah, because if a central bureaucracy owns human DNA and can control it from a central source, this creates so many problems. This is how you get forced eugenics started, is to let the government have that authority in the first place. So being able to crack down on people who are using unsafe medical practices that cause real harm, okay, I get that. But there's got to be a limit to how much they can control. So yeah, I think the Splicers are still the good guys, even if we peel those layers back. Now, they're not the good guys in the cartoon, because they're trying to change people against their will and that sort of thing. But in my rewrite, they are the good guys. And I guarantee you, you will never see a group like that in fiction. A group that deliberately changes people if they want it and are presented as the protagonists for doing so. Because comic books are all about defending the status quo, even if the status quo is not great. And that's what it sounds like when we go full biopunk. But we did it. We got through it. Full biopunk story. So yeah, in the original cartoon, it was the Splicers and Batman both doing forced eugenics. In this story, it's Batman and the bureaucrats doing it. And forced eugenics, forced bioluddism is a flavor of forced eugenics, where your ideal form is someone who looks exactly like you, so you're trying to make everyone be as normal as possible. So if anyone has a natural mutation that gives them a new ability, you would shut that down. So basically, Terry and Bruce's viewpoint in the cartoon is the same as the viewpoint of the anti-mutant factions in X-Men, which is weird that they're even being presented as heroes for that, for trying to control other people's bodies. But yeah, that's why the Splicers forced people to change against their will, so that they would be the bad guys. So it would be a clear-cut story. And I should point out, just as a peace offering, that Terry did have an excuse for changing them back against their will. Okay, he did. He did. It caused mental instability. It caused them to go nuts. So it would be like trying to get someone off of a heavy drug or something. The reason I have a problem with it still is because if such technologies existed in the real world and did not cause mental problems, people might say they do as an excuse to change people against their will back. So that's why I have a problem with it being presented that way in a cartoon. But anyway, we have now successfully gone full biopunk. We are done. We can now move on to things other than rewrites. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for listening. I have been ZJ, and remember, always gene mod responsibly. Clicky, 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 clicky.